Good afternoon and welcome. Today is Tuesday, February 11th in House Transportation. We've got a couple quick announcements before we get started. There's going to be an adjustment to the agenda for tomorrow morning. Chairman of the Lawn and Judiciary wants a bill to pass by here before it goes to appropriations. It's a topic that we've worked on last year and the year before a little bit regarding some of it's underage and related to some pieces that are motor vehicle expense, motor vehicle infractions and whatnot. We'll have the bill number for you in an email later today. And it's just one piece to follow up on something the committee hit last year. And so their council will be in at 9:15 and we'll do that tomorrow. Also, our committee member, I have spoken with Patty McCoy, Representative McCoy, and she is in a much better spot at this point. It's just that we're not exactly clear what will be next for her, but it will be a little longer. She is responding to emails, not maybe as timely as we'd all like, but if you do feel compelled to send an email, you'll eventually get a response. So she is reading your emails, and we wish her a speedy recovery. And also Representative Burke has some show and tell for us today.
Yeah, so this is a little history lesson. There was a committee member I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago named Herb Russell, Representative knows, who was on this committee, and he was a real train buff, and he was actually instrumental in getting the Rutland community behind the continuation of the Yukon Island service in 2009. Governor Douglas wanted to cut it out because they thought it wasn't, making enough money or whatever, and they wanted to replace it with a bus service. And he rallied the Rutland community, and we all took a field trip there to Albany and arrived in Rutland to great celebration, very festive atmosphere. And about, a few weeks after that, we got a notice saying that they were going to continue the service because the fuel prices were low. Well, we know that it was pressure. This is how pressure works, especially from, like the business community. And so Herb was in touch with me. Anyway, he retired from the legislature. He moved south. He was also an airline pilot. And he was in touch with me recently because he wanted to donate a few things to the transportation committee. And we used to have little trucks and things. Remember, Fran would on the table. And so he has donated Rutland, let's see, what is this? Rutland Railroad. Here. These are all sort of vintage. And this is a Central Vermont Railroad car. It's gonna, and he wanted them to be displayed on the table. And he said, this is a real Vermont Transit. Vermont used to have Vermont Transit back in the day, and this is a Vermont Transit bus. So
also, that is a piggy bank, so we can start making donations for public transit.
Right.
Just add it up at the end of the year. And,
very good point. Okay, great. Anyway, he wrote a nice note, and he said greetings to the committee, and so it's a very special thing to receive these things. Former Representative Herb Russell.
Very nice. Thank you very much, Representative Burke. We have them out there on display. And then we will start our agenda for today. My apologies for taking your first 5 minutes away from your spot, but I'm sure we can over a few minutes if we need to. Please, Sarah, if you'd like to come up and start us off and introduce, or whoever you'd like to have join in whatever direction. Associated General Contractors has been in the committee every year that I've been, and we certainly have a lot going on in workforce and construction costs and projects and all kinds of other things, and that's part of what we'll get into and wherever else you want to take us for your time today.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, so much. And thank you, committee members, for having me. I'm Sarah Muirhoff. I am the Director of Advocacy and Communications for the Associated General Contractors of Vermont. I was thinking that we could kind of structure this, that I can give a general overview to our work and what we do, we represent, et cetera. And then I have Tom Lawyer, from one of our members from Engineers Construction, Inc., who can really answer your very specific topical questions and bring that real world on the ground experience to you, and answer all of your questions. I'm happy to answer questions too. I'm just a little bit more of a generalist, if I'm being totally honest with you. So about us, AGC, we represent the construction industry throughout the state of Vermont. So We have more than 200 members throughout the entirety of the state, 224 as of the close of 2024. And I use that kind of place and time metric because we actually have more members who are actively joining and applying to join in just the past month and change alone. We represent folks in the construction industry from the vertical side, as you would call it. So folks who are building physical structures, whether that be homes, apartment buildings, mixed use, commercial, warehouses, all of that. And then also more pertinent to your committee's jurisdiction, of course, would be the transportation side of the equation. So we've got pavers, the folks who are building bridges, making sure that they are safe, painting the roads, the flaggers who are making sure that road crews are safe as they're doing their work. Those are all folks who are part of our organization, and we represent them in their interests. So as far as what I understand you wanted to hear from us today, some of the kind of pressures facing the industry right now, I don't think it's a secret that there's a lot of demand. There is an acute workforce shortage that our members are very much feeling. And then there's also the pressure of materials costs continuing to go through the roof. I mean, historic levels of material costs like we've never seen. On the demand side of things, I think there has been a lot of investment, great investment through things like the, ARPA and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. And you are probably noticing that those dollars are not going quite as far as you would hope. And that is largely because of labor being so short in supply, and then of course materials costs. And Tom can speak more to the specifics on that, but just broadly speaking, they are high. I'm sure you've noticed. And I wanted to touch on the note, I'm sure high on your mind are the topic of tariffs. And I'm fully aware of the fact that this chamber doesn't have influence over federal tariff policy, that's for sure. But that is a component that our members are very much reckoning with, and materials are very likely to increase in cost. When we're talking about state infrastructure projects, there are already mandates from the federal government, Buy American mandates, right? And so one may think just immediately knee jerk that any tariffs on foreign aluminum or steel imports may not affect the cost of materials if we're already buying American. But the fact of the matter is that markets don't exist in a vacuum. And if costs are going up on imports, it's very unlikely that American suppliers will just maintain baseline status quo. It's the more likely thing to happen is that they will match increases in costs. So that's another pressure that we're facing. And even outside of that kind of down the road possibility in terms of actual tangible impacts to material costs, I think that's the easy part of tariffs to understand. But the secondary thing I would really emphasize to you all is that just the hot and cold 1 foot in, 1 foot out dynamic of the way that these tariffs have been implemented or not so far from the feds, it throws so much uncertainty into the market for our members. And it is so incredibly difficult to plan out your budget for the year, to plan out your projects for the year, as if it's not hard enough already. The question of our material is about to shoot through the roof just throws a whole new dynamic into things. And I would say from your guys' perspective, what you can provide to our members in response to that is a level of stability and assurance from the state when our members are contracting with the state to have the state be stable partners, communicative partners, and good, fair, and honest partners with us. On that note, I think this is where I can turn it over to Tom to give you a little bit more specifics, and then maybe we can get into kind of Q&A.
Thank you. Not sure if I can fill all of her promises, but I'll do my best. So thanks for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity for sure. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Tom Lawyer. I'm with Engineers Construction. I am Vice President of our Trenches Technologies Division. We are a multi-division heavy civil contractor. We cover a lot of different markets. In my group, we're the most traveled. I cover all New England and upstate New York, so I get to see a few other things as well. I also work on our senior leadership team, which covers all business aspects, not just the discipline that I cover within construction. Personally, seventh generation Vermont family. I live in Shelburne, grew up in South Burlington, and yesterday, Sarah sent an email that said if we can try to touch on cost pressures, materials and labor, material volatility, recruiting and maintaining a workforce, which is an uphill battle for sure, better partnering with the state of Vermont and private business, out-of-state concern, and the T fund. So I'll try to touch on all of that a little bit. Probably the T fund is the piece that I'm the least involved with in our company, believe it or not, which is probably surprising. But my goal today will be to try to help identify some issues, hopefully offer some solutions with a clear understanding that there's a lot to do in this house. And I understand everything will take time to see results, but I guess simply put, it's easy to identify all the problems, but we need to find the solutions, and hopefully we can work towards that and collectively get to where we need to go. So I'll start with the workforce. Kind of in a bullet point format, not enough trained workers. Some of this stuff I know everybody knows. This is probably a redundant message, but construction pays really good wages, and there's a high demand. So I think anything we can do to get our workforce trained, those who are interested in construction and going into the trades, it's a great path. At Engineers Construction for the last 3 years, we've created a recruiting team. We've got a number of PowerPoint presentations. We've been to most all of the tech schools in the state of Vermont, and it's been encouraging, to be honest with you. There's this rhetoric sometimes. I sense that maybe the elders in our society say, "Oh, this next generation is not worth having," and I totally disagree. There are some good kids out there. We got to give them a chance, and we just got to get them to work. To be honest with you, I have all the faith in the world in them, and some of the things we're offering in the tech schools, it seems to be a little bit narrow in that, and probably because of resources, but it's pretty much electrical, plumbing, carpentry. I had an opportunity. I chair a foundation, a nonprofit foundation that got involved with the Mineville School in New York State. And they've got 3 tech schools over there. So that got pretty deep. And I really got some insight onto what they're doing over there, but they've got forestry, heavy civil. They offer so much more, and they're just doing great things. They're putting a lot of students out of there right to the workforce. A lot of them coming to Vermont, to be honest with you. So I think those efforts are solid. I think we need to do more of that. And then kind of on the drive here today, honestly, reflecting back to when I was in high school. I mean, I went to South Burlington High School. Back then, the high schools I took wood shop, I took auto mechanics, I took metal shop. So those 3 things were there, and a lot of young kids came out of there, could fix an engine or do whatever. So I don't see that in any of our public schools anymore, and I think that would be kind of nice to see, to be honest with you.
Tom, I'm going to interrupt you for a second.
Sure, please.
That I didn't do, since we have 5 new members, and you mentioned that you were from Essex Junction, went to South Burlington High School, and Shelburne now, and whatnot. Matt Walker, I'm from Shelburne and Swanton. Swanton and Sheldon represent.
Yep.
And I should have interrupted until I was read. I'll take Sheldon. So represent Swanton and Sheldon.
Thanks for having me.
Pass around the spot so you'll know where everybody else is coming from in the state.
Tim Portman from Bennington.
Natalie from Shelburne.
Oh, hi, Kate. How are you?
Molly Burke from Brattleboro.
Molly?
Chloe Tomlinson, Winooski.
Jim Casey, Addison Route 101.
Chris Keyser, Rutland City.
Candace White, I live in Waitsfield and represent Navajo Valley and Duxbury and
Ken Wells, Orleans County 3.
Phil Pouch, Heinsberg.
Thank you. Good representation. That's perfect. So we've all seen a lot here. So, along the way, I would encourage any open dialogue. That's kind of how this was an impromptu thing that just came up last evening. So we don't have a PowerPoint presentation or any of that, but just expanding on that, the Mineville, it just seemed further advanced than our textbooks are. And I don't know if it's the offerings. I mean, all of these schools, in addition to the construction skills that I mentioned, they've got nursing, there's culinary, there's a lot of really, really good offerings there. Over there, they just brought it to a whole different level. There was welding, there was just a lot more hands-on, and I just felt those students were ready to just come right out of there and go into the workforce and be well trained. And we can't expect, in my opinion, that all the training is going to take place in our public schools either. The employers have a responsibility to train. We put a lot of effort into that, safety wise, specific stuff that we need. In my division with Trenchless Technologies, we do directional drilling, we do tunneling, we do all kinds of specialty stuff. And believe it or not, one of the most important things in directional drilling is the mixing of the mud, mud technicians. And we measure viscosities of mud and how everything's going to flow. And it's pretty scientific. So those things, we do in-house. And it's better and better and better. And I think we own some responsibility there, not just the schools. And same with as a parent, you can't just put it all on the schools. We all have to do our job with our kids every day. So I think that's important. The other thing, college is I think evident. It's not for everybody. My two children did go to college. I've got a bunch of close friends who have kids who didn't go to college, and we've got great results from both in the workforce. Whether they went to college or not, it's not for everybody. The cost of college is expensive right now. I wouldn't discourage it. I would probably encourage it. But at the end of the day, there's some good people there who can go out and help us be productive in the workforce. And again, if we get them trained in school, get them out, I think that would be great. And the other things I just want to touch on the workforce is, and this is probably more on the cost side of things. I don't know where the state's at. We just had this little turmoil with the unemployment Department of Labor on just how we work really hard to not put people on unemployment. We've got about 217 employees right now, and we do everything we can do to keep everybody working. But I have no problem looking them all in the face and saying, I don't control the economy and I don't control the weather, but we do absolutely everything we can do to keep them moving. And this time around, it felt a little more disciplinary, on the employers than it was necessary. But Sarah worked through a lot of that. I think we got us in a good spot now. But if there's an incentive, a financial incentive to say, don't put people on unemployment and keep them working. We get capped out. I think the maximum you can pay is $250,000 or $260,000 a year, whatever that is. So we meet that cap every year. But if we could put that money towards keeping them working, why wouldn't we try to do that? And I don't know the overall picture. I think it probably has other residual effects that might not be positive for the state, but I think that would be positive for sure. So anything that we can do to keep the people working, if there's incentives that can be offered, I think those should be considered. That's what I've got on the workforce. Anybody want to talk about any of that on workforce? Yes.
So thank you for that. I guess two questions. The Mineville schools that you're talking about, is that Mineville, New York? Like
Yes.
technical schools in the location of Mineville,
Yes.
New York? Okay,
Yes.
just to clarify. And there were three of them that you said are like very helpful in terms of training.
I worked with
employees.
Mineville, so just a quick brief history on this. So I am president of the Classic Mike Boyer Foundation, and a short story. My brother Mike was killed in a construction accident in 2011, and from that sadness and madness, as I say, we created a foundation to assist families who lose loved ones in worksite accidents, which we've done too many times, and we have a secondary mission to help unique causes within our communities, which has been great. We're small. We're not the United Way, but probably a little prouder. So, I think we've just hit $1 million of support we've given to our communities. But what brought us over there. PC Construction had a fatality at the Beta facility, and we worked with PC, their employees, and put together a really nice package of scholarships that will last for 10 years for a number of students for a couple $100,000, honestly, and got the wood shop dedicated to Rory Gibbs, the Memorial Wood Shop, in his name. So he's the individual who passed away. He was from that area. His wife was there with us and his daughter. But getting up to that, the 8 months leading to that, we really worked tight with the school, with their administrators, and I just got to see a lot more of the workings of the inside of a tech school than I had going as a recruiting person.
So I'm assuming that a lot of your workforce is working when the weather is better. They're working like on the highway projects and so forth.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about laying them off, it's going into winter when you don't have the projects. Is
Yes.
that correct?
So we work as long as we can into the season. Some of the work we can do, like my group is fluid based on this mud. So I've got a project I've got to do in Barry right now that's we could have people out there, but I don't control the weather, back to my point. So we've kind of been paused on that. We're more fortunate than others because I think we're pretty diverse. We do heavy highway, civil, rail, concrete. We cover a lot of different territories. So we have a lot of opportunity to keep people to work. A massive fleet of equipment that guys and girls can work on all winter long, and they do. We do a lot of training, safety training. Our project engineers are always working on just different things and trying to understand the V-Trans spec books, and spend a winter on that for sure. But yeah, so we do lay off. Right now, I think we've got about 40 people on layoff. We typically call them back. We always give them the standard 10 weeks. We'll get you back, and we almost always do.
Mhm.
Sometimes there's an extension specifically for our paving group because that's so weather dependent. But we do the best we can there.
Just my follow-up question. I'm just wondering, I think about industries in Vermont that have a different cycle, like the ski resorts,
Yep.
who have a lot of need for technical people on their lift operations, lift maintenance, et cetera. I just
Yep.
wondered if there's ever any kind of collaboration with your group that's so busy in kind of the warmer weather and some of these other industries that are busy in the winter.
Not successfully, I don't think. Years ago, I've been a member of AGC for a long time, but probably 20 years ago, I was actually on their board and did a lot of work with the legislative committee back then. And we put a big effort into trying to make that successful, and it just never quite meshed for either party. The off seasons just didn't quite work for a variety of reasons. I love that idea, but at the same token, you don't want to lose employees doing that. We do in our minds on retainage with benefits, training. I would argue we're one of the better training companies, construction companies in the state of Vermont for sure. We bring that to the highest level every day. Safety is our number one priority, so that's a lot of the training we do. But it's trying to find. We probably find more work for them in-house, just make works, whatever, paint the walls, do whatever the case may be. But some people, honestly, you could say, hey, I'm going to give you 40 hours. They go crazy just sitting there looking at four walls. They don't want to do it, so we gotta try to keep them busy and best we can.
Representative Powell?
Yeah, are you aware of the law we passed last year for automatic traffic safety enforcement? So using cameras in work sites, and I expect that will be happening this year in certain work sites.
So I wasn't aware of
about that.
I'm not aware of any law on that. But if you're talking about the signalization, the automated signalization.
No, I'm talking about the use of cameras, automatic traffic.
Okay. For
law enforcement equipment at highway construction zones.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's really a trial basis.
Yep.
And to see what we learn
Yep.
about it. So are any of you going to be involved in that?
I would love to be. I'm not aware of it, honestly. God, it was probably 5 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, right in New Haven, Vermont. We had a fatality on one of our jobs, and we had everything. It was a V-Trans job. There was an engineered, submitted traffic control plan laid out to the T. At the end of the day, it was an impaired driver in the morning, and it was just a terrible situation. It was a subcontractor to us. It shook our crew to the core, the people who have to see that kind of stuff. So I would be in favor of any of that. And forever, I have said, wouldn't it be great to be able to have more blue lights out there, even on our vehicles? And, just people seem to respect blue lights more than they do yellow lights. They just slow down for it. But I don't know that would ever go anywhere for a variety of reasons.
I think the Associated General Contractors was helped us push that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we should be seeing that this year on some of the construction zone.
But I know when we work in New Hampshire, we hear it a lot, and in Vermont, where the blue light details that are out there are there to slow traffic, but are not, and you can definitely fact check me on this, but are not in a capacity to actually chase someone down. Yeah, and that just seems backwards a little bit.
Sarah, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
I don't necessarily think to add to that, just the fact that, yes, AGC was very involved in that. I can't remember the act number right off the top of my head.
S-184.
Yes. Yes, we were very involved in that and supportive of it. I have still heard from my members that speeding in work zones is still very much a problem. And the kind of question is enforcement and how to enforce in an equitable way, but also make sure that folks are safe out on the road as they're working. I mean, that's paramount.
Yeah, I would expect this committee would be looking to see how it works over the next year.
Yes.
Yeah.
See if there's an opportunity there to improve speeding enforcement in construction zones.
We were talking about this in preparation as I was talking to some of the guys in our office. Even like the Richmond project, we're doing that Richmond Bridge there. The morning, setting up your traffic control plan before it's set up, the exposure there. We've got these tight work days. We're out there right at 5:30 in the morning. It's dark enough, and it's they're just trying to slow it down. It really is. It really is. And during that episode where there was a worker on an ECI job, we were at the State House that next year, and it was just one of his coworkers made the comment. They're the first line. They're the first ones out there trying to stop the cars. That's the most. It just can't get out of the way. So.
For the committee, as far as regarding the automated speed enforcement, the pilot update and whatnot, when we are on the other side of crossover and we're on the DMV portion of or the miscellaneous DMV bill, we have Jeremy and Josh Schultz on the list of testifying when we hit that part of it. That's what part it was in, is on the miscellaneous DMV last year. And when we get to the other side of crossover, that is on our topic list. We will get an update on that pilot project that was using the license plate readers and whatnot, and those, whatever the whole construction site. So that'll be in the second half of the biennium.
And I'd be happy, Mr. Chair, at that point to bring in some additional members who can certainly speak with some first on what they're seeing out on the road.
Jeremy's name is on that update piece.
He doesn't know yet.
He did.
Just
It's on the paper that I have. I don't know if it's on the paper that you have.
I didn't met Jeremy, but I've heard his name a bunch of times. So not Jeremy.
Other questions, right? That's fine. You had mentioned about having workforce that you try to make sure you can keep employed all winter. When you try to do that, holding people, and then you head to the busiest part of the year, are there gaps that we miss or your company misses in terms of opportunity because of that? That whole limited. And granted, you've been dealing with the limited construction, season your whole the whole time the company's been in business in Vermont, but because it's hard to get them and keep them all winter, is there more work that we'd be getting done on our roads, on our bridges, on our infrastructure if we were able to if you were able to turn on a faucet quicker of more employees and more work in the spring?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think so, for sure. Yeah. No, we've talked about that. We looked at the migration, I forget the numbers. There was a program that you could get into, it was a lottery to get immigration workers, and we looked at that and what it would do to our workforce and what we could do for production wise, but there was a lot of hurdles to get over that. But so I think absolutely, if we had skilled workers, we certainly could get more work done. Absolutely.
Representative Keating?
I was in the fuel business, so I know from what you speak. And the point of trying to, it makes perfect sense. You've got CDL drivers, and it just makes perfect sense that you would have it. Trouble that here's the issue. You're employed by, you have an employee, then you're asking him to go to me.
Yeah.
He doesn't know me. He doesn't, are we going to offer the same benefits?
Yeah.
There's two, and you want that guy. You
Yeah.
need that guy. So you're not going to let him.
Yeah, exactly.
Person,
Yeah.
you don't want to let that person go.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of conflict at the individual level of trying to see your way coming and going between two different operations, particularly if you're a professional truck driver.
They're under demand for sure.
I did do it once or twice, but they were just because that particular individual wanted to work for me and would drive for Pike otherwise.
Yep.
I just want to, you can have a comment on the Davis-Bacon wages. That's basically the floor that, we got to match with the federal wages. How are other states? Is that sort of like, locked into what they'll pay, or do they go above and beyond that? And where does Vermont compare to that? Is that like a deterrent or
Well, I think people want to be near home. They want to
Yeah.
reside, so that might be a secondary consideration. My group is the most traveled in engineers construction.
Yeah.
And also, the territory that I cover gets us, 70 miles this side of New York City. And, we cover some big union areas where there's a project labor agreement, or sometimes we will work with the union halls, I dig my heels in. I don't want to put our skilled positions into the hands of a union hall with someone I just don't know, on a technical directional drill or something like that. But we pull laborers, welders, drivers, really good workers out of those areas. And our crews, honestly, we were in Harvard, Massachusetts last week, and our laborers are making $58 an hour down there. So they love it. They're good with it. But relative to the way you posed the question, I think generally, I think Vermont's in a good spot. I mean, they're not crazy low. And it's coming up a little bit more and more. We saw some work in Colchester last year where the wages were a little bit improved. So, and for the most part, we're exceeding those now, as our baseline anyway. But everybody likes big money. There's
Yeah,
no-
well, I know, that's what I'm saying is that's sort of like a,
Yeah.
I heard, one of the reasons why they're, contractors are hard to find.
Yeah. I do think people want to be near home, so I think these young kids certainly could pack up and go to a big city, but they have those costs of living as well. My daughter lived in Boston, and, she made good wages there, but the cost of living was crazy down there. So,
Thank you.
okay. Anything else on that part? Okay. So, continuing to try to address things, better partnering. This is probably more VTran specific, and honestly, VTran is our biggest customer, no doubt about it, and our most, we've got great relationships with them across the board. Me sitting here as an individual, because I work in the trenches division, that's probably not my number one client. So I spoke to some of my coworkers this morning in preparation of this to try to get some examples of potentially better partnering. One of the things that came up was compressed schedules and durations of times to complete projects. And from our sense, sometimes it's necessary, maybe sometimes it's not, maybe it's somewhere in between. It could be road closures, the public inconvenience on that. And one example was given me this morning was this Richmond project is a year ahead of schedule. We're happy with it. I believe VTrans is very happy with it. The public perception, however, is if you go and look at, the webpage and the public comments is what's taking so long? There's a lot of negative rhetoric that we understand VTrans has got to field that, which is unfortunate. But so if there's things that make sense to maybe decompress those schedules a little bit, that could help on cost, because as an estimating team, we're saying, okay, sometimes we have to have dual crews to make this timeline work. We have to have night shifts. We have to have a lot of overtime. And sometimes it has a negative impact on employee retainage, because guys and girls I just don't want to work night. I don't want to work 100 hours a week. I don't want to do that, and then we're a hardworking crew, but everybody's got a limit, you know what I'm saying? So I think those things drive costs up a little bit. And sometimes it's necessary, but that's one thing that came out of that conversation. The out-of-state concern, I think there was a comment on that. Is there a concern of companies jumping over to Maine and New Hampshire? And we haven't really seen that too much other than, companies that may be on that border of New Hampshire, they may prefer to go over there anyway. There's two sides to every story, of course, but you hear all the time, oh, New Hampshire's so much easier to work with. And my group, I work in, as I mentioned, all the New England states and upstate New York. And, they all have their challenges. And I think there's just a lot of red tape that goes along that maybe ties people's hands sometimes to making what I think are easy decisions that slow things up. So that's a little bit tough to deal with. I was also told we have a complex pre-qualification standards, and specifically, we talked about this on larger bridge projects. And this is where I'm absolutely just telling what I was told. I'm not the expert here, but there's Casco Bay and High Street Steel. They're manufacturers from steel bridges who are great to work with, but they don't want to look at any small jobs. So they won't, the Richmond Bridge, but they won't look at any of these small projects. We recently connected with a Massachusetts company. We felt good with because brought another person in. And this was as of like last week, we got a call from them that we'll honor the proposal. They got into the V-Trans pre-qualification process, and we just assume not work in that environment anymore because the pre-qualification was so difficult, and I quote them, far more complex than any other DOT in all of New England, and why. And I don't have the specifics on that, but I could bring people in who potentially do. But from my eyes, it eliminates competition. And if you eliminate competition, prices are going to go up. And then winter shutdowns, I think some work can be done. Some of the 1111 permits we do, they just say October 15th, April 15th, you can't work. And V-Trans has been awesome there in relaxing that when it makes sense. And we'll work a lot of times in the winter months with a caveat, say, you guys know the deal. We'll let you work. If it's snowing, get off the road, it's not safe. So there's a lot of cooperation there that's happening for sure. But I think if we can try to keep our people working as much as we can all year round, I think that would be good. And then on some decisions, I do think we would be better served having them done at the district level. Still V-Trans, but a lot of things go to Montpelier that probably could be decided right there at the district level. Some of the easier stuff, but so that's kind of what I got on partnering with V-Trans and anything on that. You want to talk about? Yes.
Yeah, what are some of the things that you think specifics about working as a district as opposed to central V-Trans?
Well, just having some of the 1111 permits for simple work having to go to Montpelier, and Gary might be able to say there's a reason for it, but it could be, again, I'm boring pool pipes under a road for the most purpose. Does all of that need to go to Montpelier and slow things up for 10 days or 20 days or 30 days? Or could it be a local, yes, that makes sense, let's do this, or whatever the case may be? So those types of things, some traffic control planning sometimes. It's kind of all over the board a little bit. And some of it, I think, when I hear that they won't, there's future planning concerns on the Route 7 corridor, they need to be involved so they know what's happening in the ground. Totally makes sense to me. Absolutely makes sense. So I don't know how much they can give back to the districts, but it seems as though some of the more basic stuff, they're all capable people that are, Jim Coda in District 5 is a good guy, and a lot of stuff kicks it back to Montpelier. And I'm sure there's a reason for it, but it just seems as decisions I think he could make.
I have an anecdote for how the kind of bureaucratization of things can impact projects. And I don't want to name drop exactly which project this is and where and who's doing it out of I want to be classy about it. But just as an example, there was one project one of our members was just telling me about where his team was about to pour concrete for a bridge repair project. And the state put in a work stoppage order for it. And good concerns, fair concerns. You know, these things have to be addressed in a timely way, but it delayed, you know, they had to pump the brakes for several weeks. By the time that the kind of gate was lifted, so say, it was too cold to pour concrete. And there was work that they actually could have done throughout the winter on that project. They had about 4 months of work that could have continued through the winter time, but without that concrete poured in time for the hard freeze to set in, they can't do that now I just dropped my paper, for months. And it just delays that project by months at a time. This was a crew that was set up to work, anticipating that work for an entire season, the winter season. And now that work is delayed by several months going into the spring when they already scheduled other projects to go that then have to be pushed, that then have to be pushed. I mean, this is the kind of domino effect that can happen. And I would emphasize to you all in this committee and doing your work that our members are so strapped for workers and they have so much demand right now that any kind of blip can really trigger one of those large scale domino effects. And that's kind of, I guess, my plea to you all is to recognize that it is so logistically complicated. It's such a fine-tuned machine to plan out a construction season like that. And kind of expediting those processes to prevent something like that from happening that can kind of, you know, throw the entire plan askew for up to a full year. Where it's possible would be great to prevent that from happening.
Did AOT know the timeline? Was that shared with
Yes.
them? That was relayed to them?
Yes.
Say ignored it, but they didn't process it.
Yes.
I don't know which project she's talking about. It's not our project, I don't think. But in any event, the scheduling and the work that goes into planning this is it's there's just so much to it. We're always looking out 6, 8, 12 months ahead of time. Just even looking, comparing our Gantt schedule, which has got all of our crews for every job we got going on, and then looking at our bid schedule and saying, okay, even if we bid this, could we fit it in here? There's just so much going on. So a delay like that has a massive impact. And then as responsible contractors, and I absolutely love this about being a Vermonter and all of our Vermont companies, when we have these disasters that we've had, these floods and stuff, we still just roll up our sleeves and get it done somehow. And I think we're built that way as construction companies. We want to get stuff done. But all those things add into the extra pressure for sure.
This heavy demand that you guys are under, that you feel like there's a huge demand for your services, for your business, for the whole industry. Can you talk a little bit about where Vermont fits in that picture of New England? If you're looking at all of those projects, and I don't know how many of those that means, and you're looking at your bids to keep your people continuously working, where does it fit in terms of your strategy, in terms of what Vermont options versus Western or Eastern New York, going across the lake versus New Hampshire? I heard you mention you're, 70 miles from New York City. You've been in Harvard, Mass. I think you said you've been in New Hampshire.
Not Cambridge, Mass, Harvard, Mass.
The town of Harvard, right?
Exactly.
The Harvard General Store, one of your favorite little places.
Yeah.
So
I think it's pretty relative across the board. I think our infrastructure countrywide is in bad condition, and we all got a lot to do. I sit on the board of directors for the North American Society of Trenchless Technologies, and one of my counterparts there is in that Syracuse area, who's got literally hundreds of millions of dollars of projects that he can't even get bids on. So I think this is an issue everywhere, not just in Vermont, for sure.
So the contractors have options that go as far. I mean, what kind of distances?
Well, specialty contractors might travel more, but I mean, the type of work that Eric's got down there, some of it's trenchless, some of it's just heavy civil work. I mean, he runs a really large water and sewer district down there, and for the whole city. So, but my point is, or I think I'm answering your question correctly, is what is the capacity that we have? I mean, it's really supply and demand are just, that issue is there in all areas right now, I think.
So just to go back to your comments about the delay with the cement pouring, and then your comment talking about some of the natural disasters we've had and how we've had to get projects going really quickly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is there anything we can learn from on the one side, when you all have to mobilize really quickly to address a natural disaster, and what types of systems we might, not short circuit, but what we're doing to fast track to get towns and municipalities back to where they need to be versus kind of a slower schedule.
I think the spirit is there in those crisis moments. We move quicker as both the contractors and the state. The preparedness to mobilize when something happens. We're all watching the weather. We're getting the calls from V-Trans and whomever else, get ready. We're probably going to need some help here, not just to us, to a lot of people. And that's what makes us great as a state. I think we do roll out, we do get efficient. As far as what we can do to be more proactive, I think that's happening on the engineering side of things. All kinds of stormwater work is under study, and we're looking at everything. I mean, we're contacted all the time about how we're going to do this. I mean, State Street in Montpelier's got a big storm drain project coming out here that we just lost it by 1%. We won't be doing that, but in any event, I think all of that is being looked at as far as what can we do to avoid this stuff going forward. I think Jeremy would probably agree with that. I mean, there's just a lot of this is coming at us hard, this weather stuff for sure, no doubt about it.
But I guess I'm just wondering, are there things that we do when you're responding to natural disasters, when you're getting work done quickly and well? Are there any practices that could be translated to kind of the normal course of business that would expedite the normal course of business and maybe try to not have situations like the 3-week delay in cement pouring? Because that's my
I would love to see, I mean, I'll call it a relaxed atmosphere from the standpoint of submittals and response times and Q&A back and forth, but everybody's trying to put together a responsible project, us and V-Trans. But some things could move quicker, and everybody's got staff issues too. I mean, not only the construction companies, the state does as well. So you can only move so fast. But if there's things we could do to streamline things, maybe some things just for me, for instance, on the trenchless technologies piece of things, we've got either if there's a special provision, that might be something different. But we've got a specification we need to match. Why can't I just say, here is my spec? It meets your criteria and cover every project. So I don't have to do this 100 times a year. Maybe that's something that could happen. And, I only speak from my side of the table, and I always try to be respectful of everybody. So those types of things seem to make sense to me, where we just keep repeating things over and over and over. So I think that might be one thing, potentially. That makes sense. And on the cost, the materials and all the volatility of materials for us, at least. So I'm buying raw steel, casing pipe and HDP, high density polyethylene for what I do. That stuff was extremely volatile during COVID, and it's leveled out pretty good. So we haven't had these ups and downs, but the timing of it all, so we have vendors who will say, here's your price, it's good for 2 days, and that's what you deal with, so that makes it a little bit difficult, but that's what we've had to deal with. But I think overall materials have kind of stabilized a little bit on that type of stuff, the concretes and the materials that require a lot of manpower and equipment to process, because labor costs are so high. That's obviously driven those costs up substantially.
Diesel is the other really big concern as well in terms of.
And even that's gotten a little bit better, so we've been looking at that hard. We try to think out of the box. We put fuel cubes on every job. We do everything we can do to try to minimize that, but it's expensive for sure, no doubt about it. So the other things, just some overall cost-effective things, for me. I call it the Cadillac effect. Sometimes we should just look ourselves in the mirror and say, this is what we can afford, not what do we need. We're doing a project right now in Wethersfield, Vermont. It's a $800,000 signalization project. And the technology that we see in these intersections now, cameras, battery backups, all the stuff, every bell and whistle, it costs money, and sometimes it is absolutely needed, and sometimes it's not. It could be a simple intersection. Maybe we can cut that down a little bit. And I don't know, it just seems as though everything pretty much is going to be a little bit of a box and a satellite pretty soon feeding all this stuff, and we won't need all this stuff. But underground, this is something I do want to talk about, is we are putting a piece of wire. So when we get to an intersection, we're putting either 3 or 4 pipes in to connect all these red lights together. We're putting a piece of wire in the pipe that's about the diameter of this pence. And we are putting that right now in a 12-inch casing with 3 2-inch pipes inside of it across the board. We've been doing a ton of these things, and it's overkill. Can I argue the fact that it's great to have that all extra pipe and all that extra room for future stuff? Absolutely is. But what can we afford? Because I can tell you, because I price it, it's $250 to $300 a foot versus $50 a foot to put that 2-inch pipe in.
So are we effectively requiring it's like, the first guy in has to pay for this incredible sort of overbuilt
infrastructure. Yes.
infrastructure, and then that then subsequent folks get to sort of benefit from? Is that sort of what we're?
My belief would be, unlike if I had a piece of property and I was running a water line or a sewer line to my property where I could tie on other people and get some recovery later. I don't think that's the case here, but I don't know for sure. I think V-Trans will always, whether they sell that to Consolidated Communications, I just don't know, but it just seems like crazy overkill to me. And some of the tolerances we just did a project in Morristown that was a 72-inch culvert. This is more on the technology thing. So the hydraulics, the flows on that, they needed that big of a pipe. But the tolerances that they put us on, so we have all kinds of technology, but it all costs money. And there's a standard in Vermont that is tougher than anything that we see. We did 3 72-inch culverts in New Haven under the rail corridor, 1 in Ferrisburg, 2 in New Haven, 1 project. And the tolerances on these pipes was 1 inch vertical, 1.5 inch horizontal. And I presented on that at the No Dig conference in Chicago a few years ago. And comically, the person before me did a similar project where they had a 1% tolerance. So you push a pipe out 100 feet, you got 1% or a foot to play with, as where we have to be within an inch on a storm drain pipe that's going to carry water. So what does that mean? Tunneling equipment, guided boring, it's huge costs to deliver that. But that's what they expect, and that's what you have to do. So I think there's things that we can do to relax that. And some of those are what we call a 2-pass system, where you put a pipe inside of a pipe. And the idea of that is put a big pipe in so you can adjust the other pipe to how you want it. But it's that simple, but it's not simple. But I mean, it seems it. But at the end of the day, those are the specs we have to deal with. And I just think those conversations should carry some weight, and just one last thing on the cost. It's not just the state, the cities and towns, in my opinion. Kate, I think you said you're from Shelburne too. So, I mean, we have a $7.5 million library in Shelburne. I love libraries. I think it's great. Did we really need to spend $7.5 million? Could we have gotten the same amount of square footage for a good library for $3 million? At one point, we just got to look ourselves in the mirror and say, what can we afford? As a society, it's just too much, in my opinion.
So a question that I will not touch.
Yeah, no, that's it. I would, if they said don't do it at all, I probably would have voted for it. But it's just, it's great to be able to have unlimited money to do whatever. We just don't.
So is there any type of feedback loop where you go then back into towns or AOT where you can express this and work collaboratively to try to reconcile some of these issues?
I think so. Maybe I think so. Again, I'm not the V-Trans person here so much for ECI, but I think there's opportunity there.
How would you take that opportunity?
We would love that opportunity.
So you're not having it right now?
Well, I think we're having it through AGC. Any dialogues, communications, working on that. And sometimes this is unfortunate, and I think every party's guilty. When things get adversarial when they shouldn't be, there should be more collaboration, there should be more cooperation. That's the cities, that's the towns. We just need to find a can-do attitude and versus just, doing something different, and it's frustrating. The cost of living here is terrible. It's tough.
What I'm looking for is a way that your on the ground issues can then inform the next job, and you'll have to go into the engineering. I get that. So there doesn't seem to be a circle. There just seem to be, we're doing this way, and the person that's on the ground that knows the equipment is saying, well, I can do that, but it's going to cost you a lot more. If I do this, you're going to get a Cadillac, or you're going to get a Chevy and not a Cadillac, but it's going to serve the purpose.
Right. So I think, AGC has a bridge and highway committee that I think has some opportunity to speak on that stuff with V-Trans on the front end of things, whether it's done in off seasons or not. I'm not sure on that, but I definitely feel that would be a big improvement. I hear what you're saying loud and clear. And
Representative Pouch?
It's just, I'm not sure it's a question or comment, but you maybe comment on it. When you started to describe a four-way stop and the infrastructure required and the signalization and all of that, a week or so ago, we had a discussion on rotaries and the fact that there doesn't appear to be any of that infrastructure around rotaries, no signaling, none of that.
Yeah.
So not only would the cost, I would assume, be less, assuming you have the land, but the ongoing maintenance over time.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I mean, we all go through the rotaries throughout. There's a ton of them in New Hampshire. They're everywhere. So yeah, there's less infrastructure there for sure. I'm dying to understand how this double diamond thing is going to work up there. I just can't get my arms around it, other than as a person who lives in Chittenden County. Huge issue. There's just so much traffic there. We got to do something. I don't know what the answer is, but I hope it works for sure. So
It's coming, I think.
yeah, no, it is for sure. So, and maybe, the adversarial stuff, hopefully it's not as prevalent as I think it is sometimes, but it's just time to be brutally honest with each other and just get aligned and move forward and find some common ground and to just get back to common sense if we can. So.
Do you have anything you want to finish up with in the last few minutes?
No, just thank you for having me here, honestly. And I didn't have a lot of time to prep, so I probably should have had some better fact-based stuff for you, but it was, she called me at 10 o'clock last night. Just picking.
Well, we appreciate the support of the committee, and it's important for us to understand where the agency's vendors are and what they're facing. And that's sort of the direction we wanted to get at for a little bit. And we're hearing an awful lot about cost pressures, and you obviously talked about tariff back at the beginning. We can't control, but we're all going to be impacted one way or another, whether they do or don't, wherever they head. So thank you for responding as quickly as you did, and thank you very much for coming in. Please go ahead.
My final kind of request, if you will, for you all is, given all of these pressures that we laid out for you, the cost pressures, the logistical pressures, everything, the kind of stability that I think you all can provide for the industry is a healthy and sustainable transportation fund. Whatever you can do to shore that up would be a great thing, so that our folks can really rely upon that, and they know that it's solid as a rock there.
Thank you very much. We still have another minute on that. I know we're going to hear from the pavers specifically on Friday of this week, and we're very concerned about the idea that if we start to fall behind in the amount of work that needs to be done, given all the constraints you talked about today, how would we ever catch up?
Right. Yeah.
That's certainly a big concern piece, but Representative Burke, we got
and I think
30 seconds.
we want to, big concern here is making sure we have enough money going into the T fund, and how are we going to do that going forward, given limitations. So yes, I think we're all preparing this. And I know there's a member who's presenting a resolution about concern about the tariffs, specifically against Canada. That would impact your cost as well.
Yes. Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
And as if on cue, arrives our next. There's a max capacity.
Yeah, there's a common sign that says.
Well, I'll take it personally.
We need to make that adjustment of some sort.
It's like a hotel room.
Yeah.
I thought somebody told me the other day that there isn't a maximum capacity.
I was told that it was the chair's discretion to decide what they.
Well, we certainly don't want you feeling that way. Thank you, sir.
Thank
So,
you.
Patrick, I guess you're back up with Andrea, and we're going to shift gears in a very different piece, but with some part of the budget presentations they're presenting on their the environmental policy and sustainability portion of the AOT, their budget. So we had, I think you mentioned at the end of last week, there was a couple sections of the budget we hadn't covered yet, and that's where we're kind of finishing up piece. And then you'll see on the agenda, we will be starting to dig into the T-bill language. We're going to review back last year's T-bill requirements, and then we're going to move into this year's T-bill, the language and policy requests that are out there. And then we'll get feedback on those and get testimony, and then we'll decide what other things we may or may not want to include in the T-bill. But that's sort of the agenda piece, but we have to finish up a couple more budget sections. That's what brings us to the agenda today. And certainly the bigger picture of transportation revenue with a solid and growing resource or source is part of that longer term discussion. We had some airtime filler before the first one with the gifts to the committee and the donations to the displays. And now
He could do some, taking that maybe. If people want hard copies, people.
Thank you.
I bet if you have one or two, they would get taken, and
I have 4.
I'll take one.
Bring 4.
send them on through.
It's Chris. Sorry, Ken.
I know. I'll do it.
They'll get taken, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Is it like, get out of here?
Okay. Patrick, our regular guest here.
They used their opportunities yesterday morning. That's just like that. They were doing all this. I used some of these products for the breakfast.
This actual
One like,
okay.
yeah, not the sugar. Previous.
Reminder for you to.
Helped a lot.
Okay.
For the three of us.
Seems like
The
I refreshed it.
yeah, oh, you have to refresh it?
Yeah, I refreshed it. when it came in.
So the broadcast, you know, so carry on and four pieces of paper.
Well, so you can let me know when you're.
We are roll along to our next piece. Thank you, Andrea, for coming back and presenting on budget piece. Yeah, regular.
Not sure how much more there is to talk about after this. Probably too much after this meeting.
I suspect we'll be hearing from you again.
Yeah, so I'm Andrea Wright. I'm the environmental policy manager at VTrans. Of course, you all know Patrick Murphy, state policy director, here with me to talk about the environmental policy and sustainability proposed budget for 26. And I will just start off kind of an overview of what the program is, again, just to ground everybody. And basically, the program supports the agency in all cross-cutting aspects of transportation and environment. And over the past few years, we have had a focus on climate mitigation and climate adaptation as we look to meet the Global Warming Solutions Act and the related climate action plan, the comprehensive energy plan, the state hazard mitigation plan, all these state plans that we have to work towards, and being supported through the federal IIJA, the Carbon Reduction Program, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, and the Protect Resilience Program. So basically, our purpose in all those areas is to understand the regulatory environment and make policy and initiatives around those and implement the funding associated with them. So traditionally, before we became the Environmental Policy and Sustainability Program, we had one person, and that was the Environmental Policy Manager. Now with the influx of funds, well, Patrick's position, his former position, Sustainability and Innovations Project Manager, came along to help implement the incentives programs, because we had quite a bit of funding associated with that over the few years. And then with the IIJA funding, we brought on a couple of more people. So we have somebody who focuses on resilience, somebody who focuses more on the mitigation side of things, and then that position being supported by 2 staff that help implement the programs. And then we always have a temp, legislative temp. We have not hired that person yet. We should bring that person on this week. And so you'll see a new face around too, who is just sort of the eyes and ears around here for us and sits in on a lot of testimony, takes notes, and keeps us informed of what's going on. I will say also that Patrick's new position, policy director, the environmental policy and sustainability budget does support part of his role. So 35% of his role is out of our budget. So this is the 3rd year that we've created a budget. The first year was a little bit different, and the last 2 have looked pretty similar. So just with that 1% change, basically. So hopefully, maybe we are on a path of normalizing, but you know, a lot of things are up in the air with environmental budgeting these days. So we'll see how that continues. But basically, not much change in any of the programs. The state fiscal year 25 as passed with the state transportation funds, that included a $350,000 match for the MBUF grant. It was the second half of the MBUF. We split that near $3 million anticipated funding that we would get through the MBUF into 2 years. So state fiscal year 25 had 1.4 million of that last year. So the state match for that was 350,000. So state fiscal year 25 had that. State fiscal year 26 is just really supporting employees. So there's a little bit of a drop in that 350,000 being included in that. Then again, in the federal funds, state fiscal year 25 budgeted for the second half of that MBUF. So in state fiscal year 26, we see a reduction of 1.4 million from the MBUF. Also a little bit less in the NEVI funding that we proposed between the 2 years, but an increase in carbon reduction program funds. Last year, the EPS program didn't have any carbon reduction program funds that we were putting out. And this year, we're looking at proposing 3 million for charging infrastructure. And then for the local, the change in the local match is just because we had a little bit less in the NEVI or EVSE deployment, a little bit less local match too. So this is just a breakdown. Federal funds are made up mostly of deployment of electric vehicle charging infrastructure with NEVI and carbon reduction program funds. You'll see a little difference in the amounts in the state funds, especially with the NEVI being a little less than what's shown in the federal funds pie chart there. And that's because a lot of the federal funds are supported through the vendor match. The only match that we show for NEVI is for state staff time and for third-party construction oversight. So while we say the NEVI funds don't require a state match, because of the local match, we do have some part of that has to be covered by state match. Any questions on that, on these charts?
Just a quick question. Remind me what the MBUF stands for.
Oh, sorry, mileage-based user fee.
Thank you.
We applied for and were successful in receiving 3 million.
Representative Thomas.
Thanks. My understanding was the NEVI program was suspended.
Yeah.
So is this up to date with that latest information? or-
Well, it's up to date as it changes like every
Yeah.
few seconds. But yes, so it has been suspended. We did receive a letter that said they are rescinding the guidelines for the program and the approval of the plan. So with the NEVI program, each year you have to submit a plan for approval, and when it's approved, then you get that year's appropriation. So they have suspended all of that, and we have issued stop work orders on most of the contracts that we had, well, all of the NEVI funds that we had. They are indicating that they are going to take a look at the program and come out with new guidelines, and potentially require new plan submittals sometime this spring. So, where the funds stand, they might just be frozen for now and might come back. And so that is our hope, and that we could continue with deployment of those funds in state fiscal year 26.
Representative Bird.
Yeah, can you remind me what the original grant was for the NEVI?
Yeah, I'll get into all of that.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to go through each
I was
program.
wondering what had been spent, but maybe you're going to talk
Yep.
about it. Okay.
Yep, I'll go through all of that. Yep.
How many work orders did you have to issue?
We issued of the 11 awards that we had made, 9 of them been stopped. So yeah, we can get more into the details of how much funding that is. Quite a bit. So I thought I would just start with this one. It's the environmental work plan part of our budget. You might see this in other people's budget. A lot of different programs throughout the agency have these federal highway funds for planning. We call them work plans. For us, we have 2 of them, and one of them is for energy efficiency and climate planning, and then the other one is what we call general environment. So for the energy efficiency, we're looking at carbon reduction type of activities, climate resilience and adaptation, energy planning, those types of things. And then for general environment, we're looking at like contaminated soils or Act 250, road ecology, vegetation management, those types of topics that come up. And basically, our program just supporting interagency coordination on that, sitting on interagency boards and committees, working with other state agencies to create policy and legislation, and sort of a general catch-all for expenditures of staff time, especially that can't be directly charged to other funding sources. Did I see a hand?
Maybe, but I didn't.
Okay. I saw a wave.
Thanks.
So getting into the NEVI program, National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure. Make this a little bigger. So we have, to answer your question, Representative Burke, 21 million over the 5 years. That's in formula funding. There is also discretionary grants that have been, there's been 2 rounds of discretionary grants that have been available. Vermont has not been successful in receiving those funds. But basically, a NEVI plan is required annually to access the funding, and then the funds must be spent on EV charging on designated corridors. And you've heard a lot about our plan and our 15 location priority locations that will help us get to fully built out status. So once those projects are in place, and the funds can go to other charging. So that is an 80-20 federal local match program. The vendors provide the match for that. In some cases, the match is more than 20 because they have other funding sources that may or may not remain to be available that they contribute to that. So sometimes we get a little better than 80-20 match on those. So to date, we've had $12.1 million available, and that's for federal fiscal year 22 through 24. We also had $2 million in ARPA funds that were converted to general funds for the purpose of electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So in December, we made 11 awards. We had already awarded the one for Bradford. So a total of 12 locations have been awarded funding. It's about $9.9 million total. And the only obligations that we have made, and the key word there is obligations, because that's where some of the funding can be taken back that hasn't been obligated yet. The only project that we've obligated funds for is the Bradford project, and that's about $630,000. Yeah, $630,000. So that's sort of the total picture there. We had those awards. We had 6 of the 11 sites under contract, and we were negotiating contracts for the other 5, and we have been told to pause. We were also planning a second solicitation for around now, planning to get the remaining of the NEVI funds out and also supplement that with carbon reduction program funds, where we would finish the last 3 locations of the 15 and then fill in gaps so that we would meet the state goal of having fast charging every 25 miles, and also fill in some gaps where there's inoperable stations. And that was going to be our second solicitation. That obviously is also on hold right now.
Just trying to get a clear picture. So of the 21 million, the feds paused how much? 20 million?
They have paused anything that's not obligated.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying. What's that number?
So that number,
I'm bad.
no, I put this together in so many different ways in the last couple of weeks.
It's a little over 20 million.
That's what I was figuring.
20 million,
yeah.
With federal fiscal year $25. Yeah. Because it's just one last year.
And may or may not. Because it's not obligated, they can, in effect, keep it.
Yeah.
Or claw it back once the right
It
time.
remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think that will be the subject of litigation. So it's being challenged in court.
But for now, vendors that were expecting work on sites that were picked, that were moving ahead, are on hold.
Whatever's been obligated can continue
But that
reimbursed. But
It's Bradford 1, right?
That means one. That means one. Well, we have a whole road. I think it goes White to Pouch to the Representative Lally.
So just to clarification on obligated. So the funds were committed to us, but we didn't have the money in our bank. So
the way the funding works is it's not as though you're advanced to $21 million or even the annual apportionment. You have to go through a series of federal authorizations that are dependent on the environmental permitting, on right-of-way certification, and then that once you are authorized federally for construction for an actual project, then that funding, the total funding for that project is considered obligated.
Okay.
So that's where we are with that first project in Bradford.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, because we had just gone through the solicitation process where we selected 11 sites in the fall, and then it takes a while to get under contract. We had not gone through those initial steps to be able to get those funds obligated. So then once the expenses are incurred, the state then applies for reimbursement from FHWA. And that's why they're able to kind of freeze things and tell us the program is paused.
Thank you.
And it just to provide a bigger picture of all of the IIJA programs that we are talking about, it kind of seems like these were announced in 21. The funds were available from federal fiscal year 22 through 26. Like, why haven't we done anything with them? It took years for us to receive the guidelines on a lot of these programs. And then especially with the NEVI, there's something like 2,000 requirements in the guidelines that you have to go through and figure out how to implement them. One of that was creating a new contracting process, because this is a different type of project. We don't own and operate these assets. So they're private. And so we had to come up with a different contracting process for that, which we did. And we're seen as very innovative in the way that we did that. So we got that in place. We went through an RFQ so that when we had RFIs, we could more easily and efficiently get the money out on the ground through those solicitations. And so that's just where we're at now. We're ready to go.
Couple questions, sort of on that topic. My understanding is right or wrong, I'm not sure, is that Vermont was sort of in front, of this process where some states maybe are much farther behind. I'm just curious on how we stand as a state compared to others in the process of going through all those steps, like you said. Number two, do we have any obligations at all for any of the bidders who have they started buying equipment or legally, the money's not coming. We don't know the people who have put all the work in for these designs and proposals. Two questions there.
So the first is, yes, Vermont was the sixth state to be able to get stations operational. So, and that was in the spring of this year. I think there are probably about a dozen states now that have operational charging locations. To the second question, the contracts are structured in such a way that this first 60 days, I believe, to be able to get a site hosting agreement in place. And that's what triggers that ability for our team to be able to review the environmental permitting and then go through that right-of-way certification process. So that those are the first kind of two steps in getting a project federally authorized. So the biggest expenses, ordering of equipment and installing the equipment, that all happens after that part in the process. They're not able to move forward with it until that federal authorization comes through. So we're not, as a state, at risk of sort of those expenses having been incurred and then not being able to have the funds for it. If, like with the Bradford example, the project is obligated, then we're able to continue to pay according to the memo that we received from FHWA. So that isn't a concern, but the ongoing concern is just around, I think, with all of this uncertainty, the participation of the private sector in working with the state to build out charging stations. So that's, we did well our solicitation process to get 8 parties that were actually qualified. We had many more respond, but we narrowed that list down to 8 qualified providers, which we expected to give us some good competitive bids for the various locations that we wanted. And we saw that in the first round where we actually got more locations for a less amount of money. So we expected to be able to issue a solicitation actually this week to put out almost as much as funding as we did in the first solicitation, which would, naturally have probably doubled our locations. But that is that ongoing concern is the participation and interest of the private sector.
Because I got to assume they put in a lot of money just to investigations and all that.
Sure. Yeah. We've seen proposals that where the private sector is putting in more than just the minimum 20%. And that got us further with many of our projects, or would have gotten us further. So we remain hopeful that funding will eventually be unpaused after the administration has gone through its process to review rules and sort of redesign the program.
Representative Valley and then Representative.
Yeah, so it sounds like our private contractors had to front costs to get through environmental review and right-of-way certification. Do I have that right?
No.
So who did pay for that then?
So for the Bradford project, there are two pieces to it. One is the contractor themselves. They're doing the site engineering plans and electrical engineering, that kind of thing. The state is putting in staff time to review that and clear it for environmental and right away. That's a small fraction of an overall project.
Okay.
So,
Okay. All right. And I guess my second question is, I mean, this is such a moving target this time that we're living through, but great to hear that you guys have developed this pretty streamlined process, but streamlined in a very cumbersome existing federal process. I would just encourage you to, I mean, I think we can expect that there may be some permitting relaxations that come with the Trump administration to just be poised to, how do I put it, take the money and run as soon as we get a hold of it, so we can actually try and, you know, get these things obligated as quickly as we can, just because it seems like, I mean, who knows what's going to happen. So great. And I guess, you know, keep it up.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, sorry, I'm still trying to understand the money here. So we got 21 million.
We don't have 21 million yet.
That was awarded, or
there was 21.2 million that was apportioned to the state.
to the state. All right.
Over 5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was supposed to be doled out and whatever.
After each approval of a state plan annually,
Yeah.
that would unlock the next year of federal fiscal year.
So we were awarded 9.9 million, but that's in jeopardy, right?
We made awards for 9.9 million.
To the,
Yes.
and bid out. So the only thing that we really have in hand from that money right now is the Bradford project.
That's right.
Okay, that's trying to understand.
The only one we can obligate funds for.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
NEVI story. So NEVI funds are put out through our program, the Environmental Policy and Sustainability Program. Carbon reduction program funds sometimes are put out through our programs, but also put out through other programs. So I'll get into those details a little bit more as we go on here. For the carbon reduction formula program, Vermont was slated to receive $32 million over the life of the program. You know, that funding goes to several different eligible projects as defined in the guidelines, and that could be public transit, bike ped, congestion mitigation type projects, alternative fuels, alternative lighting systems, carbon reducing measures projects. So another part of the funding could go to carbon reduction strategies. Every state was required to develop a carbon reduction strategy, and that was due November 23rd. So again, these funds announced in 21, this plan wasn't even due until November 23. So we did do our carbon reduction strategy, and we determined that we would distribute the funds evenly for bike and ped projects, for transit and micro mobility projects, and then fleet conversion, including transit conversion or our own fleets and the charging infrastructure to go along with those. So there was basically 3 buckets of funding that we said that these would go to. There is a requirement in this program that the funds be distributed in a geographic formula. So 35% of the funds can go anywhere in the state, and then based on population, there's a distribution based on population for the rest of the funds. There's also in the guidelines that funds from this program can be flexed to transit, and or that 50%, up to 50% can be transferred to other programs. They don't have to be carbon reducing programs, they can be just other programs. So there's a lot of moving parts to understanding how most efficiently and effectively to get these funds out.
Before Representative Thompson, you're
So
Are these funds also at risk of, has there been any explicit or implicit?
There is a pause on these funds right now.
Oh, these funds, okay, gotcha.
That's through the original executive order. It's a pause.
Well, it looks like we expended more than the 600,000 in this program, right? Am I reading that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Plus,
We have obligated some of the funds in this program.
so almost 10 million. 9.5, is that right?
So we have, again, it's the 80-20 match on this one. The funds that we have received total 19.3 million for the federal fiscal year 22 through 24. So it's about, for this program, it's about 6.3 or 4 per year. Is that right?
Yeah.
6.2, something like that, per year. So we have allocated different amounts through those fiscal years to different programs. 4 million into the bike ped program for the grants program. Last year was the first year that we put funds towards that program. We put 2.9 million to transit electrification, and then 3 million into the MTI program last year through the T-bill. Fleet electrification and charging, we have allocated 3.6 million to go towards that. And then we have a project or two that have that went to operational efficiency. So like congestion mitigation type of things, keeping the traffic flowing.
So on the bike pad, I know in Heinsberg, we have a couple projects, and with some of those projects are now sort of on hold. If they're in the white, they could be in the white book there.
Yes. So the thing with these bike ped projects, there was $4 million that sort of bolstered the existing program. And we reviewed those projects for eligibilities with these funds. And $2.1 million seemed like a good fit. None of those funds are obligated yet, even though awards have been made. The contracts have not been written for those, and they are not obligated. So they too are at risk. We've only obligated 3.5 million of the 19.3 million that we have.
Is there a way when you look in the white book, whether you know whether it's one that could be in trouble or not?
I don't think that shows in the white book. We certainly can show you what projects have received awards. We can get a list of those.
And those people been notified that their money's on pause, or
we are just in that process now. So the 3 projects for the bike ped was the Bennington Ninja Path, a project in Middlebury. Yeah.
So close.
A project in Middlebury, and then another project in Williston. And the only one that has construction funds that these funds could go to really soon, could be obligated to, was the Bennington Ninja Path. And that did not occur before we were told to pause. So those are not obligated. Yeah.
We can have a nice conversation.
So those are the 3.
Those are the 3, yeah. And then we have, the carry forward from the rest of that 4 million, the 2.9. So we don't know if those are available for these uses. If they're available for other uses that could get out faster. We're really in a state of flux with all of this.
I would ask that as you know information, obviously you want to tell the people who are working on those projects, but it would be good for us to know so we can put little red marks in our white books.
Yep. Yeah.
And I imagine then those projects might shuffle around a little bit based on, what money is left and what priorities there are.
Yeah. Yeah. Joel is, I talked to Joel earlier today, and he is Joel Perigro, the municipal manager. And he, is going to be talking with Bennington soon. And then, we can get the list of projects. I'm not sure. I'm just kind of pausing here because I'm not exactly sure how the MTI projects show up in the white book. I think it's more of a line item than per project like the bike ped is.
Mobility, transportation, innovation, and that's a grant base.
Representative Burke?
So the 4 million that was in last year's budget for Ed is in jeopardy or paused, correct?
Yes.
And the 3.5 or it was 3 or 3.5, I guess 2.500 extra into it. The 3 for MTI grants for this budget, 25. That's also paused.
Yeah, I'm not positive if the MTI, some of that
They
was
awarded
obligated
like 1 million
already.
I think so.
Yeah, I'd have to, I can get you a list of like sort of the status of
Ross
those.
said that they had, so whatever stage that means, I don't know. But it's a-
Yeah, so he did tell me that almost $1 million of the MTI funds have been obligated.
Obligated, so we're not,
Combining two different things.
at least have 1 million out of that 40.
Yes.
Okay. Just trying to understand what's
Yep.
actually in the.
Yeah,
In the
the
bank.
3.5 million obligated there is one project in Bennington.
What was that?
The $3.5 million that have been obligated, 3.2 of that is a signal project in Bennington. So one of those operational efficiency kind of projects. And then the remaining is just project oversight obligations that we have made through our program, just the planning oversight for these funds.
So would it be accurate to say, I don't know, I was looking at the pages here, but around 36 million is on hold. That's not just like the end of the day is like, what we tell speakers.
Yeah.
Based on the executive orders, Vermont has lost access to about $36 million that we have not obligated. Because you have the 20.
Yep.
And then it seems like 15 and change from the 19 is.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we also have the federal fiscal year 25 funds that is not in that 19.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. So how does that 32? So that 32 is
6 million.
so that's another. So we're up to 41, 42. I just wanted like a hard number to sort of we can relate to say, hey, this is the impact.
This is the implications of the freeze.
So we'll just call it 42 million.
Yeah, I mean, I would take that as an estimate for now. And if we want to be a little more clear, I can check in with our financial.
Yeah, if you can
because
do that,
of
that'd be great.
the way you can flex funds. It's a little unclear on how that is considered obligated. So some of that's been flexed to transit, that 5.9 has been obligated. I don't have that exact number there. So I can go, but yeah, I mean, magnitude wise, 30, we're talking $30 million.
Which was planned to be spent over how much of a time frame?
Well, we have 3 years from the appropriation per year, so.
It's not, I guess what I'm saying, it's not $36 million or $42 million that was going to be spent this year. It's going to be spent over
5 years.
Yeah.
Over the next, instead of 22 so over the next couple.
Yeah.
We went through these programs to get to the level of approval, where now it's just about supposed to be starting to hit the ground.
Right, the 25 funds have until 28 to expend, so.
But you were hoping to spend them sooner than that, I guess, is what. This wasn't all money that was going to be spent in the next 6 months, but it's definitely getting spent in the next
couple of years.
18 to 24 months, 36 max.
I would say 3 years, yeah.
Okay.
So that, I guess
that's currently on pause.
Okay. We always run out of time to talk about the resilience side of things. So for the PROTECT program, and that's an acronym for Promoting Resilient Operations for Transformative, Efficient, and Cost-Saving Transportation. It's about resilience. And we are to receive $37 million for that. Plus there's a discretionary grant program also associated with that. And they had one round and they have another round open right now. We haven't heard that that's closed. The applications are due by the end of this month. And so
we have something in there for that.
We have not put something in yet. We have some proposals on the table and we're determining whether or not we're going to move forward with those applications or not. A little up in the air right now. Part of the reason for that is it's up to $20 million possible, and then we have to come up with a match for that also. So significant. The match, speaking of match for these, this program had an optional plan requirement, not requirement, it's an option. You can do a plan, but you don't have to. If you do a plan and you identify projects on that plan, then you get a reduced match, or you get a greater federal match on those projects. So there's an incentive to creating a plan, and it's a good thing to have a plan to roll out millions of dollars of funding. So there's also a requirement in the guidelines that a minimum of 2% annually has to go to planning. So we have been working on improvements to our transportation resilience planning tool. We've been rolling that out to some degree to rail assets. We have a planning project planned right now for determining the effectiveness of the municipal roads general permit practices that get implemented for resilience, to see the cost benefit of those in terms of resilience. So those are some of the types of planning projects that we have out. This program also allows for 50%, up to 50% of the annual apportionment to be flexed to other programs. It gets a little even more complicated than that with the match, because you can get different, you can have a standalone resilience project, one that is for the primary purpose of resilience, or you can apply funds to the incremental cost of a project for the resilience aspect of that project. And so it depends on if it's on the plan, it's 90-10 of those incremental costs. If it's not on the plan, you can still apply it to those projects, but it's 80-20 of the incremental cost of the resilience components of that project. So for this project, for this program, 21.9 million total available from federal fiscal year 22 through 24. We have our resilience improvement plan. We have addressed some projects on that resilience improvement plan, and the rest of the funds that we've rolled out so far have gone to the incremental cost of projects that are not on the resilience improvement plan, but have resilience components. The good story here is that we have obligated most of those funds. And so we have a plan also for obligating the remaining funds. But again, this is a program that has also been paused for now. So there's, falling under the 90-day, take a look at this program, make it sure that it's what this administration wants it to be. And that funds are rolling out in accordance, I guess. So, so that's where we're at. We do, like I said, have a plan for the remaining. It's about $8.5 million that we have, about $1 million carryover from previous years, and the 7.4 annual for state fiscal year 26. We have projects. Of course, these are not in the EPS budget. They don't show there. They show in the PDB budget, the Project Development Bureau's budget, because they're going to roadway and structures types of projects. So that is what I had to share with you. And I can certainly circle back with some more detail on sort of what's been left on the table. It's clearly for the NEVI is around $20 million, $18 million. And yeah, a significant amount for the carbon reduction program.
Yeah, I think just seeing that simplified, laid out,
it's nothing simple about that.
Well, I mean, just, here's the money that's been frozen.
Yeah.
Of this money that was the total money that's been gotten.
Yeah. That is
to see the impact of what this executive order is having on what we thought we would be able to do.
Yeah,
in many different areas. So
yeah, I will be able to get that to you. That is easy to do for the NEVI. The carbon reduction program funds, because of the allowed flexibility and how we've moved money around the different programs, is a little bit trickier to understand where things are at. But I'm meeting with our federal programs people on Thursday to get that picture. So I'll get that to you by the end of the week.
Just very interested.
Yeah,
you just seeing, being able to say that number, in communications with constituents or something, to say this is what has happened.
Yeah,
thank you.
But just to confirm again, the 11 sites in the NEVI that were paused are basically ready to go as soon as we get the money. So that's some good news there.
6 of those were under contract. 5 of them are in contract negotiations, meaning that they still needed to get as a site host location. Pretty much the only thing that was preventing us from going into a contract with them. So But yes, they're all very close to being rolled out. The plan was to build those this year.
Okay, great.
Do you still move forward with those contracts to get them all teed up, lined up,
Oh,
get some funding?
um,
Five that didn't quite make it.
well, that would be a risk to the vendors, and we don't know if we can reimburse them for the work that they do prior,
Yeah,
so
I was just wondering what that, so.
we have issued stop work orders on those, on
Okay.
9 of those locations.
Representative what?
Andrew, could you just give a couple examples of what projects fall into the Protect program, just so I have a better understanding? I mean, you talked about, like, did you say highways or?
Where the funds would show up?
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of structured projects. Most of them are going to structures. So one of
Bridges.
bridges, culverts, 2 bridges, those types of projects. There's rockfall is something that we're also looking at for the discretionary grant application if we choose to go ahead. So there's been a lot of increased activity, I will say, with our rock slopes, and a lot of that has to do with climate and the freeze-thaw cycles. So that's also a project that it could go to. But yeah, primarily we are putting them to the incremental costs of increasing the size of our structures for resilience, because we've worked so much with our Agency of Natural Resources on understanding what the bridge sizes should be to pass debris during storms. So those structures are quite a bit bigger than what they traditionally have been.
And are those projects that fall under the Agency of Transportation kind of your purview, or are these grants that could come down to the municipal level and help with like a local town?
These are projects in our capital program. So, could help towns also. Some of them are in the state system. Some of them, yeah, I think they're all on the state system, these program funds. So we have been talking with some municipalities, regional planning commissions, about their interest in submitting for the discretionary grants. We've heard some mixed results in the last week or so, whether or not those entities are going to continue to move forward with just uncertainty of where they stand.
So, Andrea, if I understand it, in the NEVI program, you issued already 9 stop work orders. In the carbon reduction bike ped, you're starting to notify people that received grant notifications that that's all on hold. And in the Protect program, which are mostly towards structures, we're in the same scenario. You total that all up, it's $42 million over the next 3 years or more that are ballparking that you're not committed to that number at this point. But we're at 42 million over the next up to 3 years in our overall effort to address climate related, right back to the laws of what you've been working on for the last 3 years to get these things into place, and you're bringing them home, in effect, some would say, to the finish line based on what the group was put together for to address. And now when we're actually starting to put shovels in the ground, now we're at pause.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that's what I'd say. I understand the testimony of the last 45 minutes. Is that fair to say? What am I missing any part of that? Just a sum up of where we're at without the.
Well, the
without
is on hold.
Well, if it's Bennington related, that's definitely on hold. Those are just jokes. It just feels that way that it's all Bennington. So, but that was specifically mentioned. There were 4, I think there were 3 or 4 specific projects that are likely to be there. You had committed to a follow-up to Representative Pouch and the committee about what might be red flagged in the book at this point. But that would be after Thursday and beyond when you meet with the rest of the federal program spot. This is clearly a fluid thing that we will have you be either updates through emails and pieces, or occasionally, since Patrick's here such a regular basis, we'll throw us more updates. Did I miss anything in that big summary of what we've just sort of learned?
That's it.
Is there any good news?
Sometimes it seems like there might be a glimmer of good news and then it goes away really quickly.
Determined.
Okay. Do we have more questions for our witnesses at this point? Okay. Well, that can wrap a little bit up early for Greg. Thank you for coming in and updating us on this fluid situation, and we're adjourned for